I'm Jeremy. Today is day 66 of reading. Today we're reading Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Number 40. Through the house, on the third landing, a door stood ajar. Harry just caught sight of a pair of bright brown eyes staring at him before it closed with a snap. "Ginny," said Ron, "you don't know how weird it is for her to be this shy. She never shuts up normally." They climbed up 2 more flights until they reached a door with peeling paint and a small plaque on it, saying Ronald's room. Harry stepped in, his head almost touching the sloping ceiling, and blinked. It was like walking into a furnace. Nearly everything in Ron's room seemed to be a violet shade of orange. The bedspread, the wall, even the ceiling. Then Harry realized that Ron had covered nearly every inch of the shabby wallpaper with posters of the same 7 witches and wizards, all wearing bright orange robes, carrying broomsticks, and waving energetically. "Your Quidditch team?" said Harry. "The Chudley Cannons," said Ron, pointing at the orange bedspread, which was emblazoned with 2 giant black C's and a speeding cannonball. "Ninth in the league." Ron's school spell books were stacked untidily in a corner, next to a pile of comics that seemed to feature The Adventures of Martin Miggs, the Mad Muggle. Ron's magic wand was lying on top of a fish tank full of frog spawn on the windowsill, next to his fat gray rat, Scabbers, who was snoozing on a patch of sun. Harry stepped over a pack of self-shuffling playing cards on the floor and looked out of a tiny window. In the field far below, they could see a gang of gnomes sneaking one by one back through the Weasley's hedge. Then he turned to look at Ron, who was watching him almost nervously, as though waiting for his opinion. "It's a bit small," said Ron quickly. "Not like that room you had with the Muggles. And I'm right underneath the goal in the attic. He's always banging on pipes and groaning." But Harry, grinning widely, said, "This is the best house I've ever been in." Ron's ears went pink. Chapter 4. At Flourish and Blots. Life at the Burrow was as different as possible from the life on Privet Drive. The Dursleys liked everything neat and ordered. The Weasleys' house burst with strange and unexpected. Harry got a real shock the first time he looked into the mirror over the kitchen mantelpiece, and it shouted, "Take your shirt in, scruffy!" The ghoul in the attic howled and dropped pipes whenever he felt like things were getting too quiet, and small explosions from Fred and George's bedroom were considered perfectly normal. What Harry found most unusual about life at Ron's, however, wasn't the talking mirror or the clanking ghoul. It was the fact that everybody there seemed to like him. Mrs. Weasley fussed over the state of his socks and tried to force him to eat 4 helpings at every meal. Mr. Weasley liked Harry to sit next to him at the dinner table so he could bombard him with questions about life with the Muggles, asking him to explain how things like plugs and the postal service worked. "Fascinating," he would say, as Harry talked him through using a telephone. "Ingenious, really. How many ways Muggles have found of getting along without magic?" Harry heard from Hogwarts one Sunday morning about a week after he had arrived at the Burrow. He and Ron went down to breakfast to find Mr. and Mrs. Weasley and Ginny already sitting at the kitchen table. The moment she saw Harry, Ginny accidentally knocked her porridge bowl to the floor with a loud clatter. Ginny seemed very prone to knocking things over whenever Harry entered a room. She dived under the table to retrieve the bowl and emerged with his face glowing like the setting sun. Pretending he hadn't noticed this, Harry sat down and took the toast Mrs. Weasley offered him. "Letters from school," said Mr. Weasley, passing Harry and Ron identical envelopes of yellowish parchment, addressed in green ink. "Dumbledore already knows you're here, Harry. Doesn't miss a trick, that man. You two've got them too," he added, as Fred and George ambled in, still in their pajamas. For a few minutes there was silence as they all read their letters. Harry's told him to catch the Hogwarts Express as usual from the King's Cross station on September 1st. There was also a list of the new books he'd been needing for the coming year. Second-year students will require The Standard Book of Spells, Grade 2, by Miranda Gottschalk. Break with the Banshee, by Gilderoy Lockhart. Gathering with Goals, by Gilderoy Lockhart. Holidays with Hags, by Gilderoy Lockhart. Travels with Trolls, by Gilderoy Lockhart. Voyages with Vampires, by Gilderoy Lockhart. Wandering with Werewolves, by Gilderoy Lockhart. Year with the Yeti, by Gilderoy Lockhart. Fred, who had finished his own list, peered over at Harry's. You've been told to get all of Lockhart's books too, he said. The new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher must be a fan. Bet it's a witch. At this point, Fred caught his mother's eyes and quickly busied himself with the marmalade. That won't come cheap, said George, with a quick look at his parents. Lockhart's books are really expensive. Well, we'll manage, said Mrs. Weasley, but she looked worried. I expect we'll be able to pick up a lot of guinea slings secondhand. Oh, are you starting at Hogwarts this year? Harry asked Ginny. She nodded, blushing to the roots of her flaming hair, and put her elbow in the butter dish. Fortunately, no one saw this except Harry, because just then Ron's elder brother, Percy, walked in. He was already dressed, his Hogwarts prefect badge pinned to his sweater vest. Morning, all, said Percy briskly. Lovely day. He sat down in the only remaining chair, but leapt up again, almost immediately pulling from underneath him a molting gray feather duster. At least, that's what Harry thought it was until he saw that it was breathing. Errol, said Ron, taking the limp owl from Percy and extracting a letter from under its wing. Finally, he's got Hermione's answer. I wrote to her saying we were going to try and rescue you from the Dursleys. He carried Errol to a perch just inside the back door and tried to stand him on it, but Errol flapped straight off again, so Ron laid him on the draining board instead, muttering, pathetic. Then he ripped open Hermione's letter and read it out loud. Dear Ron, and Harry if you're there, I hope everything went all right and that Harry is okay and that you didn't do anything illegal to get him out, Ron, because that would get Harry in trouble, too. I've been really worried, and if Harry is all right, will you please let me know at once? But perhaps it would be better if you used a different owl, because I think another delivery might finish your one off. I'm very busy with schoolwork, of course. How can she be? Said Ron in horror. We're on vacation, and we're going to London next Wednesday to buy me new books. Why don't we meet in Diagon Alley? Let me know what's happening as soon as you can. Love from Hermione. Well, that fits nicely. We can go and get all your things then, too, said Mrs. Weasley, starting to clear the table. What are you all up to today? Harry, Ron, Fred, and George were planning to go up the hill to a small paddock the Weasleys owned. It was surrounded by trees that blocked it from the view of the village below, meaning they could practice Quidditch there, as long as they didn't fly too high. Thank you, everyone. That's all for today. Bye. See you tomorrow.